The rhythmic clang of hammer against nail was almost hypnotic. John wiped sweat from his brow, the late June sun, already baking the corrugated iron roof of the two-story house in Muldrow. He was hammering another sheet of steel plating over the windows, a grim foreboding churning in his gut. He knew people were whispering, calling him paranoid, obsessed even. But John had seen the signs, the news reports that didn't quite add up, the hushed conversations in dark corners. He knew something was coming, something bad. His obsession had started a month ago, a deep dive into fringe science and discarded military reports. It had led him to theories about experimental viruses, rapid mutation, and government cover-ups. What fueled his conviction now was the increasingly erratic weather. The sun was hotter than he'd ever remembered, burning his skin even through sunscreen. He glanced at the stack of metal sheets, leaning against the house. "Just a few more," he muttered, his voice barely audible above the hammering. He had a week, maybe less, before whatever was coming hit. He needed to be ready. This wasn't just about boarding up windows. John had spent weeks transforming the quaint two-story house into a fortress. His mods had been essential. The core of his plan revolved around self-sufficiency. He had chosen this house for its location, close enough to town to scavenge, but far enough removed to offer a semblance of isolation. He'd spent the last few weeks working tirelessly, reinforcing the walls with layers of thick, insulated panels he crafted himself. He'd even spent hours perfecting a triple-glazed, armored window design. His most ambitious project was the installation of two powerful air conditioning units, powered by an array of solar panels he'd carefully positioned on the roof. The solar apocalypse mod added a terrifying twist: zombies that healed in direct sunlight, becoming even more dangerous due to the generated heat. He needed to keep the house cold, a sanctuary from the blistering sun and the relentless horde he knew was coming. He finished boarding up the last window and stepped back, surveying his work. The house looked less like a home and more like a bunker, but that was the point. It had to be a safe haven. Inside, the house was a testament to his preparation. The living room was stacked high with canned food, bottled water, and medical supplies. He had a water purification system connected to a rainwater collector on the roof, ensuring a steady supply of potable water. In the basement, he had established a small hydroponics farm, growing vegetables under artificial light, a vital source of fresh food during the long months to come. He had downloaded countless books and guides to his laptop, detailing everything from basic first aid to advanced survival tactics. His arsenal was extensive. He had a collection of firearms, meticulously cleaned and maintained, but his focus was on close-quarters combat. He had crafted several variations of freezing weapons, designed to slow down and incapacitate the undead. A modified baseball bat with a cryo chamber, a makeshift freeze grenade launcher, even a custom-built freezer spear. Each weapon was designed to exploit the zombies' vulnerability to extreme cold. That night, sleep was fitful. The oppressive heat seemed to seep through the walls, fueling his anxiety. He tossed and turned, haunted by nightmares of swarms of flesh-eating creatures, their eyes glowing red in the scorching sun. The next morning, the news confirmed his worst fears. A flu-like illness was sweeping across the region, causing violent behavior and rapid decomposition. The authorities urged people to stay calm and remain indoors. John snorted. Stay calm? That was hardly applicable to what was coming. He spent the day making final preparations. He topped off the generator with gasoline, double-checked the solar panels, and organized his weapons. As dusk settled, an eerie silence fell over the town. The sounds of traffic had ceased, replaced by an unsettling quiet. Then, it began. At first, it was just a few isolated moans, carried on the wind. Then, the moans grew louder, closer, punctuated by the shuffling of feet. He peered through a crack in the steel plating, his heart pounding in his chest. They were there. A small group of shambling figures lurked in the street, their bodies grotesque and decaying. They moved with a horrifying, unnatural gait, their eyes fixed on the house. John took a deep breath, steeling his nerves. This was it. The moment of truth. He retreated into the house, locking and bolting the reinforced door. He switched on the air conditioning, the hum of the units a welcome sound against the growing cacophony outside. For the next few days, the siege was relentless. The zombies clawed and pounded at the walls, their moans a constant, unnerving reminder of their presence. The sun beat down mercilessly, turning the outside world into a scorching hellscape. John rationed his food and water, carefully monitoring his supplies. He spent his days reinforcing weak points in the house, tending to his hydroponics farm, and practicing his combat skills on makeshift targets in the basement. He slept in shifts, always alert, always ready. The air conditioning kept the house cool, a stark contrast to the inferno outside. He watched the news on his laptop, but the broadcasts were increasingly chaotic and unreliable. Society was collapsing. One afternoon, while checking the solar panels, he saw them. A massive horde, numbering in the hundreds, was moving towards his house. They were drawn by the sound of the generator, the only sign of life in the desolate landscape. John knew he couldn't hold them off forever. He had to be smart, strategic. He prepared his freezing weapons, loaded his firearms, and waited. When the horde reached the house, he was ready. He opened fire from the reinforced windows, picking off the zombies one by one. He used his freeze grenades to slow down the advancing horde, creating pockets of icy ground that tripped and disoriented them. He didn't just fight. He observed. He learned. He noticed that the zombies near the solar panels were noticeably faster and more aggressive, their decaying flesh practically steaming in the intense sunlight. The mods effects were very real. The battle raged for hours. The noise was deafening. The heat was unbearable. But John held his ground. He was fueled by adrenaline, determination, and a primal instinct to survive. As night fell, he emerged victorious. The horde had been decimated, their frozen bodies littering the perimeter of the house. But he knew they would be back. They always came back. Days turned into weeks, weeks into months. The seasons changed, but the zombies remained. The sun continued to blaze, making life outside the house a deadly gamble. John adapted. He learned to scavenge at night, using the darkness as cover. He refined his farming techniques, becoming more self-sufficient. He honed his combat skills, transforming himself into a hardened survivor. He was no longer just John. He was a warrior, a survivor, a fortress. He had faced the apocalypse, and lived to tell the tale. The house was his world, his sanctuary. And he would defend it to his last breath. The rhythmic clang of his hammer, no longer driven by fear, but by a quiet determination, echoed through the desolate landscape. He was building, constantly improving his defenses. Because in Project Zomboid, with the solar apocalypse raging outside, survival was a constant battle, a relentless test of ingenuity, and a testament to the enduring power of the human spirit.